Their house was very dilapidated and looked like it was seconds away from falling apart. Once Tobias parked the car, he then pulled my luggage out of the trunk and threw it to the ground and began to violently search through it until he found my passport. Once he did, he scooped it up and put it in pocket. "Hey, that's mine. What are you doing?"
Quiet, silly girl. You belong to us now, and without this, you won't be able to run away. Patricia gave you up for adoption when you were a baby without my knowing, but now we have you back, and you are our property.
I tried to reach out and grab the passport from him, and he easily shoved me away and then slapped me so hard that I... Hello there. My name is Jessica, and the past 2 years have been quite the roller coaster. I doubt what happened to me would happen to most people. But I want to tell you my story so that just in case hearing my story might help someone else. So let me start off by saying that I had pretty much always known that I was adopted. My parents had always felt that I should know this fact, but also that they loved me more than anything else in the world, and that they felt that adopting me was the best decision that they had ever made. They had adopted me when I was very young, and so they had been the only parents that I had ever known. And honestly, I had a very happy childhood. That is, until I turned 14. There was a terrible accident. My parents were on a yacht that belonged to a friend of theirs, and during a sudden and unexpected storm, the ship sank and they drowned. The whole experience scarred me and gave me an irrational fear of the water. After the funeral, my mother's sister Cecilia took me in and did her best to fill the void that had been left when my parents passed away. Thankfully, she was just as lovely as my mother had been, and I truly did love and appreciate everything that she was doing for me at the time. But the whole experience had opened up something in me. It made me realize that life was short and I wanted to know more about where I had come from. And so I began to do some investigative research to who my birth parents were.
Are you sure you want to know who they are? You might not like what you find out.
That is a possibility, but yeah. I would rather know that they are awful people than never know a thing about them. I don't know why, but it's just something that I have to do.
Well, I'm here to support you no matter what happens. Just don't forget that no matter what you find out, that you always have a home here with me. I love you, Jessica, and I only want the best for you.
My aunt was absolutely amazing. And more than once, I questioned whether I was doing the right thing, or if I should just give up and accept that my birth parents had given me up, and that my life was just separate from theirs. However, something made me keep looking. As a teenager, I didn't have a lot of resources as I didn't have money to hire a private investigator or anything, but I was pretty handy when it came to finding things on the internet, and I used a message board, and against all odds, I managed to find my birth parents. As it turned out, they were looking for me as well, and had posted some information about my adoption on the message board. Of course, I was careful, as I suspected that it might be a scam, and so I told my aunt, and we then privately messaged them to make sure that they were who they claimed to be, and they knew everything about my adoption, including where I was adopted from, who adopted me, and all of my medical history as well. Once I knew who they were, I began chatting with them every day, and we started to develop a bond. Things were going so well, in fact, that they invited me to come visit them during my summer break from school. They lived in another country, and the thought of going on a trip for the summer to a faraway land sounded exciting. The only real snag was that my aunt would be unable to come with me, as her job wouldn't allow her to take her vacation during the summer, as it was her busy season, but she did agree to let me go. Once the school year ended, I packed my bags and got on a plane bound for Greece. I knew that I should have slept on the flight there, but I was so excited that I just couldn't fall asleep. When I landed, I was greeted by my birth parents and found out their names were Tobias and Patricia. It felt awkward at first to finally meet them face to face, but that didn't last long. My mother threw her arms around me and kissed me dozens of times. We then got into their car and drove through the countryside until we arrived at their home, which was pretty remote. They even had a makeshift drawbridge that crossed a river that surrounded their property. I could tell that they really valued their privacy. Once we pulled up in front of their house, though, I had a sinking feeling come over me, and I began to get worried. Their house was very dilapidated and looked like it was seconds away from falling apart. Once Tobias parked the car, he then pulled my luggage out of the trunk and threw it to the ground and began to violently search through it until he found my passport. Once he did, he scooped it up and put it in pocket. "Hey, that's mine. What are you doing?"
Quiet, silly girl. You belong to us now, and without this, you won't be able to run away. Patricia gave you up for adoption when you were a baby without my knowing, but now we have you back, and you are our property.
I tried to reach out and grab the passport from him, and he easily shoved me away and then slapped me so hard that I fell to the ground. Looking up at Patricia, I hoped that she would defend me, but she looked down at me on the ground and smiled.
Don't try anything foolish. The river that surrounds our home is very fast and you will drown if you try to cross it. And should you talk back or disobey us, being slapped is the least of your worries.
I had no idea what was going on, but I quickly learned that I needed to be careful what I said around them. After they stole my passport, they dragged me inside and showed me to a small room that had a straw mattress and a thin burlap sheet for a blanket but no pillow. Aside from that, the room was empty. That night I tried to sleep, but it was so cold and the straw offered no comfort at all. As soon as the sun came up, they put me to work. In the morning, they had me cleaning the entire house and preparing meals for the day. And in the afternoon, they had me doing yard work, clearing out the weeds from the garden and even chopping firewood. When the sun finally set, I was beyond exhausted, and Tobias locked me in my new bedroom. I had been planning on searching the home for a phone or a computer once Tobias and Patricia went to bed, but with the door locked, I was unable to do a search. The next day was the same, and the day after that, and the day after that. I was convinced that I was going to be living this nightmare for the rest of my life. Since I had no other options, I decided to try to have a talk with Patricia and appeal to her maternal instincts. I waited until I was alone with her and was sure that Tobias wouldn't overhear us. "Hey, Patricia, why are you and Tobias doing this to me?"
You are our child, and as such, you need to do as we say. You were gone for 15 years and have a lot of work to make up for.
But how am I supposed to do that? Plus, you were the one to give me up. I never chose for you to put me up for adoption.
It was a mistake, but we will make you work hard until it is time for you to be married.
Married? I have no plans of getting married.
No, but we do. We have arranged to sell you to a wealthy family to marry their son. He is coming over in a few days to see you. After that, the two of you will be married and we will be wealthy. We will use the money to renovate or buy a new house, and then some savings for some stuffs I can't tell you. For now, keep working, or else you will be forced to see your future husband while having a black eye and a split lip.
I knew that her threat was all too real, and the idea that all this was just a ruse to get me in their hands just so they could sell me off was revolting, although it did give me a plan. There was no way of knowing if it would work, and it would mean that I would have to face a fear that had plagued me since my parents passed away when I was a child. I wish I could say that the days passed by quickly, but they were grueling and hard. But the morning came when I was to meet my future husband, and as I braced myself for another hard day's worth of work. Patricia unlocked and opened the door to my room. In her hands, she had a pretty purple dress.
Put this dress on. Malcolm will be here soon to make sure that you are worth marrying, and you better put on a good act. If he doesn't marry you, we shall make sure that you regret ever being born.
All I could do was nod my head and agree and hope that my plan would work. Once I was dressed, I was led outside and introduced to Malcolm, who turned out to be a middle-aged, heavyset man. The way that he leered at me made me feel very uncomfortable. It was obvious that he rather liked how I looked, and, considering our age differences, it sent a shiver up my spine.
Okay, you two lovebirds go for a walk and talk and get to know each other. We keep an eye on you from a distance, though.
Malcolm walked over and offered me his arm so that he could lead me around. Against my better judgment, I accepted his offer and wrapped my arm around his and let him lead me away from the house. As we walked, he kept shifting his arm around to touch me. At first, he just rubbed my arm, but slowly he began rubbing my back and moving his arm slowly downwards. Before he could truly harass me, I made my move. Malcolm, do you think we could walk closer to the river? I find being near the water very romantic.
Of course, my dear. I would spend time with such a lovely creature as you anywhere.
He steered me towards the river, and as soon as we were close to the riverbank, he pulled me in close and tried to kiss me. He was so incredibly strong, but there was no way that I was going to let those monsters marry me off to this disgusting man. As he leaned in, I thrust my knee as hard as I could into his crotch, but rather than make my break at that moment, I kneed him a second time just to be sure. As he toppled to the ground, writhing in pain, I punched him in the face just for good measure before turning towards the river and running at full force. The thought of trying to swim across the water terrified me, but only half as much as staying and getting married to Malcolm. As I ran out into the water, I was surprised to find that it was only a foot deep, and as I waded across, it never got any deeper. Either it was an unseasonably dry time of year, or Tobias and Patricia had been bluffing about the river. At any rate, I made it across and then ran down the road as quickly as I could. I had seen a house down the road when they had first brought me here, and I ran towards it as fast as I could go and was relieved when I made it there before they managed to catch up to me. Once inside, I spoke to the family, who thankfully spoke English, and told them what had happened to me. The mother of the family quickly phoned the police, who showed up within 10 minutes. There were several police cars, and while one stayed with me to take my statement, the others raced down the road towards Patricia and Tobias's home. I later found out that the police had only arrived just in time to prevent Tobias, Patricia, and Malcolm from fleeing. All three were arrested on the spot. When they went to court, though, Malcolm received the lightest sentence since he hadn't actually done anything, but he had still attempted to marry a minor, and he was sentenced to a year in prison and over 1,000 hours of community service. As for Patricia and Tobias, they were sentenced to prison for life. Among their charges were kidnapping, abuse of a minor, trafficking of a minor, and attempting to resist arrest. Apparently, both of them wouldn't let the police handcuff them, and they fought back and were only subdued when the police used their stun guns on them. After that, I was finally able to return home to be with my aunt, who blamed herself for letting me go, although it wasn't even remotely her fault. After all, how were we supposed to know what kind of monsters those terrible people were? And there you have it. That's my story, and I hope by telling it that I might just help someone out. Be careful out there. Sometimes the least likely people are the worst monsters.